The mansion glowed that evening, golden chandeliers throwing soft light across polished marble floors. Hannah Matthews moved slowly through the dining room, one hand resting against her rounded belly. 8 months pregnant, her glow was undeniable. Her smile, radiant. Her laughter, soft like music. From the corner, Delilah Grant watched. Her eyes lingered too long, drinking in every detail of the life she swore was supposed to be hers. Hannah didn't notice. She never did. She was too wrapped in Elijah, her billionaire husband, her protector, the man whose devotion was carved into every gesture. When he pulled out her chair at the table, when he brushed a strand of hair away from her face, when he bent low and whispered something only she could hear, making her laugh like a girl in love for the first time. Delilah's fists clenched around the napkin she was holding. She had been hired as just a maid, nothing more. But every day she cleaned their home, every time she set Hannah's gowns in the walk-in closet, every night she carried trays of fruit or herbal tea into their bedroom. It killed her, because Elijah should have been hers. Her gaze swept over him now, tall, broad-shouldered, his presence commanding. Even in silence, he drew the room to him like gravity itself. He reached for Hannah's hand across the table, lips grazing her knuckles with such tenderness it made Delilah's stomach twist in rage. That should be me. The words burned in her chest. And as Hannah leaned against Elijah, whispering about baby names and nursery colors, Delilah made a silent vow. She would not be invisible forever. She would not serve and smile and vanish into the background of their perfect love story. One way or another, Hannah Matthews would pay for stealing the life she deserved. But first, Elijah needed to notice her. What about you? Have you ever seen love so perfect it made you jealous? Be honest. Drop your thoughts in the comments below and hit the subscribe button while we begin this journey. Welcome to MG's Love Stories, where passion burns, hearts break, and you can't stop watching. Don't just listen. Feel it. Like this story? Share, subscribe, and let's dive in. Delilah smoothed her apron, masking the storm in her chest. She carried the dessert tray forward, her heels soft against the marble. She bent low, placing a bowl of strawberries between them, her perfume faint but deliberate. She wanted Elijah to look at her, just once, but he didn't. His gaze never left his wife. Hannah giggled as he lifted a strawberry to her lips. She bit into it, sweet juice running down her chin, and Elijah leaned in with a napkin to wipe it gently. A kiss followed, slow, indulgent, meant for no one but them. Delilah turned away, her heart pounding. Rage and desire tangled in her chest. She whispered under her breath, "Enjoy it while you can, Hannah. Soon, you won't be smiling anymore." The camera of fate was already rolling, and in the quiet of that golden-lit mansion, love, jealousy, and poison were about to collide. The mansion was quiet now. Hannah had retired to the nursery, humming softly as she arranged tiny clothes in pastel drawers. Elijah was in the study, flipping through papers, occasionally glancing at the clock, waiting for his wife to return. Delilah lingered in the hallway, her hands gripping the edge of a polished railing. The evening light framed her silhouette, but the warmth of the mansion could not touch the cold burning inside her. She remembered the day she first laid eyes on Elijah Matthews. He had been in the lobby, stern yet magnetic, dictating terms to an assistant, completely unaware that a young maid from nowhere had stopped dead in her tracks. The way he moved, the way he spoke, it had felt like destiny mocking her. She had always been good at watching, at learning, at waiting. She smiled, a small, cruel smile. "Patience," she whispered. "It's not just about being noticed. It's about being desired." Her obsession had grown quietly, meticulously. She memorized his routines, what time he drank his coffee, which shirt he preferred, how he smiled at Hannah when she wasn't looking. Every detail became fuel for her plans. At night, when she cleaned the empty rooms, she would linger near the master bedroom door, imagining what it would feel like to stand where Hannah did, to have Elijah look at her with that same tenderness. Her hands would tremble, sometimes with excitement, sometimes with rage. I should be the one he whispers to, she muttered, pacing the marble floor. I should be the one he protects. I should be the one carrying his child. Her breath caught at the thought, but the reality was cruel. She was invisible, a shadow in the halls of their perfect home. She smiled and nodded when spoken to. She carried trays and polished silver and washed the floors as if it were all she deserved. But every task was a reminder of her exclusion, and it was driving her mad. Delilah's mind wandered back to the first night she had slipped a hand near his jacket, brushing against the fabric he had worn moments earlier. He hadn't noticed, of course, but the memory lingered. The thrill, the longing, the tiny spark of power. It had all hooked her. She knelt to straighten a rug in the living room, and a thought crossed her mind, sharp as a knife. What if I could remove her? What if there were a way to make her disappear? Her pulse quickened. She shook her head violently. No, not now. Patience. Wait. But even as she whispered the words, her imagination painted a darker picture. Poison in a cup of tea. A subtle slip of a hand in the kitchen. A life that could be ended quietly, easily, leaving her in the glow of victory. A cold shiver ran down her spine at the audacity of her own thoughts, and she smiled. Tonight, she told herself, she would begin researching. Every herb, every plant, every method. Knowledge would be her weapon. Knowledge would give her the power to rewrite the life she had been denied. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a little voice whispered, Elijah should want me. He should crave me. He should choose me. Delilah's reflection in the grand hallway mirror startled her. The girl staring back was both innocent and wicked, a perfect disguise. One look at her own eyes, and she knew she could walk into the room at any moment and betray, manipulate, and seduce without anyone guessing her true intentions. But first, she needed control. First, she needed patience. As Hannah hummed in the nursery, arranging tiny socks and onesies, Delilah imagined a future where the nursery might belong to her child instead. The thought thrilled and terrified her. And somewhere in the shadows of that mansion, a plan was beginning to take root. One that would change everything. The kitchen smelled of fresh herbs and roasted chicken, but Delilah's mind was elsewhere. Her hands moved automatically, chopping vegetables, arranging dishes, stirring sauces, while her thoughts drifted to darker ingredients. Ones that could change everything. She had spent nights reading, researching, memorizing recipes that seemed innocent but held deadly potential. A pinch here, a drop there, subtle, undetectable. Knowledge was power, she reminded herself. Power she had been denied for too long. Elijah's laughter floated from the dining room, rich and warm, the kind that made Hannah's eyes sparkle and Delilah's chest tighten with envy. She carried the tray closer, every step calculated, every movement precise. You're quiet tonight, Elijah said, his gaze sweeping over her as he poured wine for Hannah. Delilah froze, smiling politely. Yes, sir. Just making sure everything is perfect for your dinner, she murmured, her voice calm, betraying none of the storm inside her. Hannah looked up, radiant as ever. Thank you, Delilah. You always do such a wonderful job. Delilah's jaw clenched invisibly. Wonderful, perfect, blessed. Words that should have described her. Words that belonged to her. She set the tray down with exaggerated care, letting her fingers brush just slightly against Elijah's as she passed. His eyes flicked to hers for a split second, just long enough to make her heart leap. But then he smiled, distracted by Hannah's question about the baby's room. The flame of desire and envy burned hotter. Delilah bent lower, arranging the silverware, and whispered under her breath, soon, very soon. After dinner, while Hannah retired to the nursery and Elijah returned to his study, Delilah lingered in the kitchen. She opened a small, hidden cabinet and pulled out a vial, small and unassuming. Inside was a clear liquid, harmless to the eye but deadly in its effect. Her hands shook slightly as she held it. This was her first step, the first act that would break the life she had envied for so long. She thought of the baby Hannah carried, of the love Elijah lavished on her, and a cold thrill ran through her. Not hate, not anger, power. She wanted control. She wanted recognition. She wanted what had been denied her since the day she first walked into this mansion. Delilah poured the liquid into a small cup of herbal tea she prepared for Hannah, pretending to stir sugar. Every movement was careful, flawless, a professional's touch hiding a killer's intent. "Just a taste," she murmured. "Just one sip, and everything changes." The next morning, Hannah reached for her tea, smiling up at Delilah. "Thank you for always thinking of me," she said, sipping delicately. Delilah's pulse quickened as she watched Hannah drink. Each moment was drawn out, each second a test of patience and nerve. And when Hannah set the cup down, smiling and none the wiser, Delilah's lips curled into a slow, triumphant smile. But even as satisfaction coursed through her, a tiny pang of fear crept in. What if something went wrong? What if Elijah noticed? What if she had gone too far, too fast? No, she had planned this carefully. Patience and precision. That was her edge. Still, she allowed herself a small indulgence, imagining the moment Elijah would finally look at her. Not as a servant, but as the woman he should have wanted all along. She would stand tall, proud, and victorious. But fate, as it often does, has its own plans. Hannah felt a slight dizziness, a subtle chill that made her pause mid-step. She shook her head, blaming exhaustion, smiling at the sunlit nursery window. Delilah watched silently from the kitchen doorway, her heart racing. The first move was made, and now the game had truly begun. If you were Hannah, would you trust the people around you or sense the danger hiding in plain sight? Like this video if you're hooked on the suspense. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting soft patterns across the dining room. Hannah Matthews sat at the table, her hands resting lightly on her belly. The aroma of freshly brewed tea and warm bread filled the room, but her stomach churned with a faint unease she couldn't yet name. Elijah came in, tie loosened, jacket draped over his arm. He kissed her forehead gently and smiled, unaware of the storm brewing in their kitchen. "You're up early," he said, taking his seat. "Feeling well?" Hannah nodded, brushing a hand over her swollen belly. "I'm fine, just a little tired, I guess." Delilah entered quietly, balancing a tray with Hannah's breakfast. Her movements were deliberate, precise, her face the picture of calm. She placed a steaming cup of herbal tea in front of Hannah, leaning slightly closer than necessary. "Good morning, ma'am," she said softly, her eyes glinting with hidden intent. "I made your favorite tea. It'll help you feel more relaxed." Hannah smiled, unaware. "Thank you, Delilah. That's very thoughtful of you." Elijah's gaze swept over the maid as she withdrew, a slight tightening around his eyes. He trusted her, but something in her demeanor seemed off. Hannah lifted the cup to her lips, savoring the warm liquid. Delilah's pulse raced. The first step had gone smoothly. Now it was only a matter of patience. She lingered near the doorway, pretending to tidy the curtains while keeping a careful watch. Moments passed, and Hannah set the cup down, still smiling. "It's perfect," she said, "just like always." Delilah allowed herself a slow exhale, a smile curling on her lips. But even as satisfaction surged, there was the smallest twinge of anxiety. One misstep could ruin everything, one sign of suspicion, and her carefully constructed world would collapse. By mid-morning, Hannah began to feel faint. A sudden dizziness washed over her, making her grip the edge of the table. Elijah, noticing immediately, rose and steadied her. "Hannah, what's wrong?" His voice, usually so calm, carried a thread of panic. I don't know," she whispered, pressing a hand to her forehead. Her face had paled. Her heartbeat seemed irregular. Delilah hovered nearby, offering a hand to steady Hannah, her expression one of concern so convincing it could fool anyone. "Maybe you need to lie down," she said gently. "Yes, perhaps you're right," Hannah murmured, leaning against Elijah as he helped her toward the bedroom. Once Hannah was settled, Delilah retreated to the kitchen, her hands shaking slightly as adrenaline surged through her veins. The first step of her plan had worked. And yet, as she cleaned the dishes and rearranged cutlery, her mind raced ahead. She imagined the days to come. Subtle adjustments in meals, tiny doses here and there, enough to weaken Hannah without drawing suspicion. Her heart thudded with excitement and fear. But as she stared out the kitchen window, her reflection catching in the glass, she saw something she hadn't expected, a flicker of guilt. For a moment, the life she was destroying felt painfully real. The warmth of Hannah's presence, the innocence in her smile, the love she shared with Elijah. It was all too human, too beautiful to destroy. No, Delilah shook her head. That was weakness. She couldn't falter now. Not when the endgame was so close, not when she had imagined this moment for so long. She set the table for the evening, rehearsing in her mind how she would act, how she would appear innocent, helpful, harmless. Every gesture, every word had to be precise. One slip, one moment of doubt, and all of her years of careful observation and planning would be for nothing. Meanwhile, in the bedroom, Elijah sat beside Hannah, holding her hand, his worry deepening with each passing minute. "You've been working too hard," he said softly. "Let me call the doctor, just to be safe." Hannah shook her head weakly. "No, it's probably nothing. I feel strange today." Elijah studied her, his brow furrowing. "I'll stay with you. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." Delilah watched from the doorway, invisible in the shadows. Her lips curled into a faint, triumphant smile. She had orchestrated the moment perfectly. Yet, there was a new sensation gnawing at her, anticipation mixed with unease. How far could she go before the consequences spiraled beyond her control? The day wore on, Hannah lingering in bed, pale and fragile, Elijah at her side. Delilah moved quietly through the mansion, performing her duties flawlessly, hiding her satisfaction behind a mask of concern. She imagined the look on Elijah's face when he realized how dependent Hannah would become. And in the quiet moments, she allowed herself to fantasize. Not just about power, but about a world in which she could step into Hannah's place, wearing the smiles meant for someone else, hearing words of devotion whispered for her alone. But fate, ever watchful, has a way of twisting the most meticulous plans. Later that afternoon, Hannah's condition worsened slightly, causing Elijah to send a quick message to the doctor. Delilah's stomach clenched with fear and excitement. She had planned for subtlety, but the real consequences of her actions, real sickness, real fear, hit her like a cold gust of wind. Still, she smiled. She could not let herself hesitate now. As night fell, Hannah rested under Elijah's watchful gaze, pale but peaceful for the moment. Delilah cleaned the kitchen one last time, every movement precise, every breath calculated. She knew the next days would be critical. Every sip, every meal, every interaction would matter. And in the silence of the mansion, she whispered to herself again, "Soon, everything will be mine." Hannah shivered under the blankets, unaware that the life growing inside her, the life Elijah cherished, was now imperiled. Delilah retreated to the shadows, her eyes gleaming with ambition, knowing that the first step had been taken, but the storm was only beginning. If you were Elijah, would you trust the people around you, or sense the danger hiding in plain sight? Comment below what you would do. The sun had barely risen when Elijah's hands were on Hannah again, checking her pulse, brushing a lock of hair from her pale face. "Hannah, you're still so weak," he said, worry etched in every line of his face. "I'll call the doctor again." Hannah shook her head, forcing a weak smile. "No, Elijah, I'll be fine. Maybe it's just tiredness. You know how exhausting these days can be." But even she couldn't ignore the dizziness, the nausea that seemed to cling to her like a shadow. Every sip of water, every bite of toast, felt like a gamble. Delilah watched from the doorway, pretending to adjust the curtains. Her chest heaved slightly, not with exertion, but with a thrill that bordered on fear. Her plan was working. Every subtle reaction, every faltering step of Hannah's, reinforced her belief that control was close. Elijah noticed the maid's presence and narrowed his eyes, just slightly. Something about the way she lingered, too calm, too composed, too perfectly attentive. He dismissed the suspicion almost immediately, focusing instead on his wife. But the thought lingered like a whisper. Be cautious. Hannah tried to rise from the bed, clutching the sheets, but her legs betrayed her. She sank back, breath hitching. Elijah caught her instantly, wrapping her in a protective embrace. Don't try to fight it, he murmured. Just rest. Let me take care of you. Delilah's heart raced as she watched the intimacy between them. The husband, the wife, the connection that had driven her obsession from the start. Her envy boiled over, making her teeth grit together. She longed to step in, to replace Hannah in that embrace, to feel Elijah's devotion directed at her. Her mind, always calculating, began to twist scenarios. The smallest dose here, a tiny drop there, and the scales would tip. She could become the center, the one he noticed, the one he needed. The afternoon passed in quiet tension. Elijah hovered over Hannah, helping her sip water, tucking blankets around her, brushing her hair back with gentle fingers. He whispered reassurances, small words that carried weight far beyond their sound. Words meant to comfort, but they stoked Delilah's rage. She retreated to the kitchen under the guise of preparing a light meal, moving with precision, every movement deliberate. Her eyes flicked toward the nursery window where Hannah had spent a brief moment arranging baby clothes, smiling faintly despite her weakness. Delilah's fingers brushed a small vial hidden in her apron pocket. The thrill of its potential power pulsed through her veins. She had waited for this, and yet the sight of Hannah, so human, so vulnerable, gave her pause, but only for a heartbeat. She forced herself to focus. Patience, precision, control. That was the way to victory. Meanwhile, Elijah noticed Hannah's growing fatigue. I'll take the day off, he said firmly. We'll stay together. You won't be alone. He helped her rise, guiding her carefully to the couch, making sure every step was safe. Hannah rested against him, her hand on her belly, and for a fleeting moment, the room seemed like paradise. But Delilah's shadow lingered just outside the doorway, watching, waiting, planning. She imagined herself in Hannah's place. Elijah's gaze, his protective hands, the warmth and love that had always been reserved for someone else. She imagined the life she would claim if only she could eliminate the obstacle in front of her. And then, without warning, Hannah gasped, her face twisting with sudden dizziness. Elijah's eyes widened. He caught her mid-fall, pulling her close, heart hammering. Hannah, you're hurting me, he whispered, his voice tight with panic. Talk to me. Tell me what's wrong. Hannah shook her head weakly. I don't know. My stomach? Everything feels off. Delilah's chest tightened with triumph and fear. Her plan was unfolding perfectly, but the reality of its consequences. Real sickness, real fear, real dependence was undeniable. Her pulse raced, but she smiled faintly, the thrill of control mingling with the edge of panic. By evening, Elijah had summoned the doctor, a quiet man who examined Hannah thoroughly. Tests were ordered, questions asked, and yet, there was no immediate explanation. Hannah's symptoms were subtle, almost mysterious, perfect for Delilah's careful plotting. As the doctor left, promising to return the next morning, Elijah stayed by Hannah's side, worry etched deep into his features. We'll figure this out together, he whispered. I'll protect you, always. Hannah rested against him, drawing strength from his words. Yet, somewhere in the shadows, Delilah's mind raced faster than the beating of her own heart. Her plan was no longer a fantasy, it was reality. Every moment, every subtle action, brought her closer to what she desired. She smiled at the thought, letting her imagination wander. The moment when Elijah would look at her the way he looked at Hannah. The moment she would finally step out of the shadows and claim the attention, the love, the power that had been denied to her. But even as the fantasy thrilled her, there was a small, sharp stab of uncertainty. Fate had its own hands in the mansion, and the threads of this dangerous plan were tighter than she could see. One misstep, one moment of exposure, and everything she had built could collapse. Hannah drifted to sleep in Elijah's arms, pale and fragile, unaware that the love surrounding her was being poisoned by the very hands that served it. Delilah watched silently, heart pounding with desire and fear. Her first moves were successful, but the real game was only beginning. If you were Elijah, would you sense the danger lurking so close? Or trust the people around you blindly? Like this video if you're on the edge of your seat. The morning air carried a chill as sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the Matthews mansion. Hannah Matthews stirred slowly, the lingering weakness from the previous days making her movements hesitant. She touched her stomach instinctively, a flicker of unease running through her chest. Something wasn't right, and she couldn't shake the feeling. Elijah entered the bedroom quietly, removing his jacket and loosening his tie. His gaze swept over her, warm and protective, but worry shadowed his features. "How are you feeling today?" he asked softly, lowering himself to sit beside her. Hannah hesitated. "Better, I think, but I can't explain it. It's like a heaviness I can't shake." Elijah's hand found hers. "We'll get through this. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." Delilah lingered just outside the doorway, pretending to arrange a vase of fresh flowers. Her eyes glimmered with the thrill of her plan, but she noticed the way Hannah's gaze flickered toward the kitchen window, suspicion barely contained. A small pang of unease stirred inside her. Hannah had always trusted her maid, but the subtle dizziness, the sudden waves of nausea, she couldn't ignore them anymore. And somewhere deep in her heart, a seed of doubt began to take root. Later that afternoon, Hannah lingered in the study, flipping through a book while Elijah answered calls in his office. She felt a twinge of unease as she noticed Delilah moving silently in the hallway, her steps careful, her eyes always watching. It was almost imperceptible, but Hannah's instincts were sharp. "Delilah," she said casually, trying to mask her curiosity. "Did you see the package I left in the study yesterday?" Delilah turned, smiling innocently. "Yes, ma'am. I made sure everything was in place." Hannah's heart skipped. There was something in Delilah's eyes, something fleeting, almost imperceptible that didn't sit right. A shadow, a hesitation. She made a mental note, deciding to keep her observations quiet for now. That evening, Hannah's unease grew. Her food tasted slightly off, though she couldn't explain how. A faint bitterness lingered on her tongue, and her stomach twisted uncomfortably. She paused mid-bite, glancing toward Delilah, who stood near the doorway, pretending to straighten a curtain. Hannah's pulse quickened. Was it paranoia, or was someone deliberately trying to harm her? She decided to confide in Elijah later, but even then, she didn't know how to articulate the gnawing suspicion that had settled in her mind. Meanwhile, Delilah moved with the precision of a performer. Every smile, every word, every gesture was carefully measured to maintain the facade of innocence. Yet inside, she felt the tiniest flicker of fear. Hannah's eyes had grown sharper, more observant. Suspicion was dangerous even for a carefully plotted plan. That night, Hannah lay in bed, awake despite Elijah's steady breathing beside her. The shadows of the room seemed to twist, carrying whispers she couldn't place. A thought gnawed at her mind. Could someone close to us really be a threat? Her fingers traced the edge of the blanket as she remembered small inconsistencies over the past days. The subtle scent in her tea, the way Delilah lingered too long in the kitchen, the tiny smirk that had flickered across her face earlier. Elijah stirred beside her. "Hannah, you're worrying too much," he murmured. "Get some rest. Everything will be fine." Hannah forced a smile. "I know. I can't shake the feeling that something isn't right." In the hallway, Delilah paused as she passed, pretending to adjust a picture frame. Her heart skipped. Had Hannah noticed? The tiniest flicker of awareness in her eyes could unravel months of planning. Hannah's suspicions grew over the next days. Subtle signs, an off taste in her meals, unexplained fatigue, the feeling of being watched, hinted at a hidden danger. She confided in Ruth, her childhood friend, who had come to visit. "Ruth," Hannah whispered, pulling her close. "I don't know what's happening, but I feel threatened. I can't explain it. And I can't tell Elijah. He's too trusting." Ruth's eyes widened. Hannah, be careful. Sometimes the danger isn't obvious. Keep your eyes open. Elijah, meanwhile, remained protective but unaware. Every concern he voiced only intensified Hannah's inner turmoil. She didn't want to see him worried, but the gnawing suspicion persisted, growing like a shadow over their perfect life. Delilah, sensing Hannah's mounting unease, began adjusting her approach. Patience, she reminded herself. One misstep could destroy everything, but hesitation could be equally fatal. She needed to remain the calm, helpful maid, while subtly tightening her grip on the household. The tension in the mansion grew palpable. Every glance, every word, every movement carried weight. The once serene home had shifted. It was a stage for deception, jealousy, and the first signs of betrayal. Hannah couldn't sleep that night. She lay awake, heart racing, mind spinning with suspicion. She thought about Elijah's unwavering trust, the life growing inside her, and the maid who had always seemed too observant, too careful, too perfect. Could she trust anyone? She wondered. Or was the danger closer than I ever imagined? Delilah, in her room, lay awake as well. She was thrilled and terrified in equal measure. Hannah's suspicions were growing, but she remained blissfully unaware of the true threat. Delilah smiled faintly, running her fingers along the vial she had hidden days ago. The game was escalating, and the thrill of the chase of control consumed her. Hannah's eyes snapped open in the dead of night, heart pounding. Somewhere in the shadows, she sensed a silent presence, a hidden truth waiting to be uncovered. Delilah's plan was in motion, but now Hannah was beginning to see the faint cracks in paradise. If you were Hannah, would you confront your suspicions or wait to gather proof? Comment below what you'd do. It could save a life. The mansion had never felt so silent. Even the ticking of the antique clock seemed louder, marking each passing second with an almost menacing rhythm. Hannah Matthews moved carefully through the halls, her instincts sharp, senses heightened by the unease that had plagued her for days. Elijah was in the study, poring over documents, but even he sensed the tension that had begun to choke the house. The usually calm, serene atmosphere of their home now carried a weight that none could ignore. Hannah paused outside the kitchen, her gaze falling on the small vial tucked into the corner of a drawer she rarely noticed. It glimmered faintly in the afternoon light, clear but ominous. Her pulse quickened. She reached for it, hands trembling, and as soon as her fingers touched the glass, a wave of dread washed over her. It was poison. Her mind raced. She had suspected, but seeing the evidence crystallized the danger she and her unborn child were in. The pieces began to align. The dizziness, the faint bitterness in her tea, the subtle nausea, the way Delilah lingered too long, watched too closely, smiled too innocently. Hannah! Elijah's voice startled her. He had followed her quietly, concern etched deep into his face. I found something, she whispered, holding up the vial. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were resolute. It's poison. Delilah, she's been trying to hurt me. Elijah's eyes widened, disbelief and horror warring across his features. Are you sure? Hannah nodded, her hand steady now as fear gave way to clarity. Yes, I felt it. I tasted it. And this. She held the vial higher, letting the evidence speak. She's been trying to poison me. And the baby. Elijah's face hardened. His protective instinct ignited, burning brighter than ever. Show me everything, Hannah. Every detail. Hannah recounted the subtle signs, the dizziness, the taste, the way Delilah's eyes lingered, her presence always just a little too perfect. Elijah listened intently, every muscle in his body taut with anger and disbelief. Get her, he said finally, his voice low but commanding. We confront her. Now. Delilah, meanwhile, moved through the hallway, arranging silverware with precision, unaware that her plan was unraveling. She glanced at the nursery, seeing the quiet peace that Hannah now held, and felt a thrill of anticipation for the confrontation. But the faintest flicker of fear stirred in her chest. Something was off. Hannah entered the kitchen first, holding the vial tightly. Elijah followed, silent, powerful, determined. Delilah turned at the sound, smiling politely. "Good evening," she said softly, her voice smooth, unshakable. "I was just finishing up here." Elijah's gaze fixed on her, hard and unwavering. "Delilah, step forward. Now." Delilah froze, a flicker of fear crossing her face before she masked it with her practiced smile. I don't understand, sir." Hannah stepped forward, holding up the vial. "You've been poisoning me, Delilah, trying to harm me, and my baby. I saw the signs, the subtle bitterness in my tea, the dizziness, the nausea. Everything points to you." Delilah's lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. Her eyes darted between Hannah and Elijah, calculating, searching for an escape, but none presented itself. "You've been obsessed," Elijah said, his voice sharp, controlled. "Obsessed with me, with what's not yours. You've endangered the life of the woman I love, and our child. Do you understand the consequences?" Delilah's hands trembled faintly, but her gaze remained defiant. I only wanted, I deserved." "You deserved nothing," Elijah snapped. "You betrayed our trust, our home, our lives. Do you hear me? Nothing." The weight of his words, the fury in his tone, pressed down on her. For the first time, Delilah realized the scale of her miscalculation. Her carefully constructed plan, months in the making, was collapsing in a single moment. Hannah, trembling but resolute, stepped closer. "We trusted you," she said softly, "but every word carried a steel edge, and you tried to destroy us. I should have sensed it sooner, but I won't let fear rule me anymore. Not now." Delilah's eyes filled with tears, a mix of frustration, fear, and disbelief. She opened her mouth, trying to explain, justify, plead, but Elijah's gaze held her still, unyielding. "You'll face the consequences," he said, "and we'll make sure you never hurt anyone again." Delilah's defiance faltered. The reality of her actions crashed down on her. The obsession, the envy, the poison. Everything she had imagined would grant her control now rendered her powerless. For a moment, she stood frozen, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on her like a stone. Hannah watched her quietly, strength tempered with sorrow. This had been a close call, too close. Elijah stepped forward, placing a protective hand over Hannah's shoulder. "This is over," he said, his voice calm but unwavering. "The danger is gone, and we're safe." Hannah nodded, still holding the vial as evidence, her breath coming in shallow, steadying gasps. The shock and fear lingered, but she felt a surge of relief. She was alive, her baby was safe, and the threat that had haunted their lives for days had been confronted, revealed, and neutralized. Delilah's shoulders slumped, the weight of defeat and realization hitting her fully. Her obsession, her envy, her calculated malice. All of it had led to ruin. She had underestimated Hannah's intuition, Elijah's vigilance, and the strength of their bond. In the quiet aftermath, Hannah and Elijah embraced, holding each other tightly. The mansion, once a stage for deceit and danger, felt warm and safe again. But the memory of Delilah's betrayal lingered, a reminder of how fragile trust could be, and how quickly love could be threatened by envy and obsession. Delilah was gone from the immediate picture, but her shadow would haunt the Matthews mansion for weeks to come. Hannah knew that healing would take time, that trust would need rebuilding, and that even the strongest love could be tested by darkness lurking in the heart of someone once trusted. If you were Hannah or Elijah, would you forgive or let betrayal define the future? Comment below. Let's see what you do. The Matthews mansion felt different that morning. Sunlight poured in through the tall windows, illuminating rooms that had been shadowed by fear and deceit. Hannah Matthews sat in the nursery, arranging the tiny clothes for her unborn child with deliberate care, her hands steady for the first time in days. Elijah entered quietly, removing his jacket and letting it fall onto a chair. He watched her for a moment, taking in the serenity in her posture, the careful, gentle motions. Relief coursed through him, but worry still lingered. Trust, once broken, takes time to mend. You're smiling, he said softly, approaching her. It's good to see you like this. Hannah glanced up, returning the smile. I feel better, safer. She hesitated, then placed a small hand on her belly. And the baby, I think it feels safer too. Elijah knelt beside her, placing his hand over hers. I'll protect you both, he promised, voice steady and unwavering. Always. For a moment, the weight of the past week, the dizziness, the nausea, the poison, seemed distant, almost unreal. But the memories lingered like shadows, and Hannah knew that rebuilding trust would be a delicate process. They spent the day together, talking quietly, sharing plans for the nursery, discussing baby names, and imagining the life they would build once the danger had fully passed. The intimacy between them deepened, forged in the crucible of fear and betrayal. Every touch, every glance, every word carried meaning, a promise to guard and cherish each other above all else. Hannah found herself opening up about her suspicions, the subtle clues that had led her to Delilah's deception. Elijah listened carefully, validating her instincts and supporting her strength. Together, they pieced together the timeline of Delilah's obsession and the steps she had taken to manipulate and endanger their lives. You were so brave, Elijah said, holding her face in his hands. You noticed what I didn't. You saved us. Hannah's eyes glistened. I couldn't have done it without you, without knowing you'd protect us. The emotional tension that had once threatened to fracture their bond now transformed into a profound connection. Trust, though shaken, began to rebuild on a foundation stronger than before. Honesty, vigilance, and shared love. Meanwhile, Delilah's fate unfolded elsewhere. Authorities had been alerted once Elijah and Hannah uncovered the vial and the evidence. She had been removed from the mansion, questioned extensively, and finally arrested. Her obsession, envy, and envy-driven malice had caught up with her. Though she protested, denied, and tried to rationalize her actions, the evidence was irrefutable. Poison in a cup of tea, deliberate manipulation of meals, and the clear intent to harm Hannah and the unborn child all confirmed her guilt. Hannah felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, anger, sadness, and even a tiny flicker of pity for the woman who had allowed obsession to consume her completely. She understood that envy could drive people to terrible acts, but she also knew that forgiveness would not come easily, nor should it. Some betrayals leave marks too deep to ignore. Elijah stayed close, watching Hannah navigate her emotions, supporting her decisions while offering comfort and reassurance. We'll heal, he said. Together. Hannah nodded, allowing herself to believe it. The journey ahead would require patience and care, but she felt stronger knowing they were united. As days turned into weeks, the mansion slowly returned to its former warmth. Delilah was gone, and the presence of trust and vigilance replaced the lurking shadows of fear. Elijah and Hannah celebrated small victories. Meals prepared together, walks in the garden, quiet evenings planning for the baby. Each moment became a reminder that love, though tested, could endure even the darkest of betrayals. The bond between them strengthened, rooted not only in passion but in resilience, courage, and the shared experience of surviving a calculated threat. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elijah held Hannah close on the balcony, the sky painted in shades of gold and pink. We're safe now, he whispered, and stronger than ever. Hannah leaned into him, heart swelling with gratitude and love. Yes, she said softly, stronger and ready for the future. In the nursery, soft moonlight fell on the tiny clothes, the carefully arranged furniture, and the crib that awaited the life they would nurture together. The house, once shadowed by envy and betrayal, now shimmered with hope, protection, and enduring love. And somewhere deep within, Hannah knew this. The scars of the past would never fully vanish, but they would serve as a reminder of strength, vigilance, and the resilience of trust. Though the danger had passed and Delilah faced justice, a quiet tension lingered, a reminder that envy and obsession could surface in unexpected places. Hannah and Elijah clung to each other, aware that love alone must be vigilant, protective, and unwavering. If you've ever faced betrayal, would you fight for love or let fear control you? Like, share, and comment your thoughts. We want to hear your story. The Matthews mansion was quiet that morning, bathed in the soft glow of dawn. The events of the past weeks, the fear, the betrayal, the near tragedy, had left an indelible mark on the couple, but there was a sense of fragile peace in the air. Hannah stood at the nursery window, hands resting on her belly, feeling the gentle stirrings of the life within her. Each movement, each flutter, was a reminder of hope, resilience, and the love that had endured even the darkest threat. Elijah entered quietly, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Morning," he whispered, pressing his lips to her temple. "How are my two favorite people doing today?" Hannah smiled, closing her eyes at the warmth of his embrace. "Better," she said softly. "I feel alive and safe." Elijah's hands tightened gently around hers. "And you will always be, I promise." The events of Delilah's betrayal lingered in their minds, but the couple had chosen a path forward, one built on honesty, vigilance, and unwavering love. Hannah had learned to trust her instincts, and Elijah had seen the power of paying attention to the subtleties of those around him. Together, they were stronger. Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to a rhythm of calm and contentment. Meals were shared with laughter, evenings spent planning for the nursery, and quiet moments cherished like treasures. The mansion, once a stage for deception, now resonated with warmth and protection. Yet, even in peace, the shadows of the past taught lessons that would remain. Hannah reflected on the fragility of trust and the importance of intuition. Elijah, too, recognized the need for vigilance, understanding that love alone cannot always shield against envy or malice. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and amber, Elijah and Hannah sat together on the balcony. The air was filled with the quiet hum of the city, distant and serene, a contrast to the turmoil they had endured. "We've survived so much," Hannah said softly, leaning into his shoulder. "I never thought I'd feel this safe again." Elijah kissed her hair, his gaze steady. "We've learned, Hannah. We've learned that trust can be rebuilt, that love can be stronger after betrayal, and that fate has a way of testing us, but it also rewards resilience." Hannah nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I've realized something," she whispered. "Forgiveness isn't just about the other person. It's about freeing ourselves from the weight of anger, fear, and obsession. Even if Delilah will face consequences, I need to forgive, for me, for our future." Elijah's eyes softened. "You're right. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's strength. And we've proven that our bond can withstand anything." The couple embraced again, holding each other close, the serenity of the evening wrapping around them like a protective cocoon. Their love, tested and tempered, had emerged stronger, a testament to resilience, courage, and unwavering devotion. Days turned into months, and the nursery became a sanctuary of hope. Every detail, every choice, reflected the love and care they poured into their growing family. Hannah's belly swelled with life, each kick a joyful reminder of their triumph over adversity. Elijah became more attentive than ever, balancing vigilance with tenderness. Every meal prepared, every word spoken, every glance shared carried a depth of understanding forged in the fires of fear and betrayal. Hannah, too, grew stronger, her intuition sharpened, her instincts refined. She moved through the mansion with quiet confidence, aware of the fragility of life and trust, yet unafraid to embrace joy and love. One afternoon, as they walked hand in hand through the garden, Elijah stopped and looked at Hannah with intensity. "You know," he said, voice low and tender, "we survived something most people never would. And yet here we are, stronger, closer, and ready for whatever comes next." Hannah smiled, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "Yes," she whispered, "we've learned the value of vigilance, the power of intuition, and the beauty of forgiveness. And we've seen how love, true love, can endure even the darkest trials." The sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow over the garden, illuminating the path ahead. Together, they walked forward, hearts entwined, their bond unbroken, ready to welcome the life they had fought to protect. In the weeks that followed, they prepared for the arrival of their child, a symbol of hope, resilience, and new beginnings. Every nursery detail, every gentle touch, every whispered promise reinforced the depth of their connection. And when the day finally came, and Hannah held their child in her arms, Elijah's tears glistened with unspoken gratitude. "We made it," he whispered. "We survived everything together." Hannah looked down at their newborn, heart full. "Yes," she said softly, "together. And nothing, no envy, no betrayal, no darkness can take this away." The mansion, once shadowed by jealousy and malice, now shimmered with love, protection, and hope. Trust had been rebuilt, lessons had been learned, and the couple had emerged stronger than ever. In the quiet of the night, Hannah and Elijah sat together, the baby sleeping peacefully between them, their hands intertwined, their hearts beating in unison. They understood the deepest truth of all. Love tested by adversity grows deeper, wiser, and unbreakable. And somewhere in the echoes of the past, the story of betrayal lingered, not as a threat, but as a reminder of the resilience of the human heart, the power of intuition, and the unyielding strength of love. Hannah and Elijah faced fate, betrayal, and danger, but they emerged stronger, wiser, and deeply connected. Their love survived envy, obsession, and near tragedy. Life, they realized, was fragile, but love, true, tested, unwavering love, was invincible. If you believe in love that survives betrayal, in resilience, and in second chances, like, share, and subscribe. Tell us in the comments how you would overcome obstacles in love.